What's up guys, it's Patricia from tarantulaheaven.com, and today we're going to be talking about how to choose the perfect tarantula terrarium. Now this might be a video that's more suitable for beginners, but that's okay because most of my audience is beginners and we were all beginners once, weren't we? If you're new here, you probably don't know this special lady. Her name is Spidey. She is a Chilean rose hair and she's moving, and so she's usually in all my videos. So if you want to see more of her or just learn more about tarantula facts, interesting tarantula stories and research, definitely subscribe because I put out videos every single week about this stuff. So choosing the perfect tarantula terrarium is another thing that you have to worry about when you're just getting into the tarantula hobby, on top of all the different care requirements and things you need to look out for. And it's a lot, right? You also need to know everything about the tarantula enclosure that you need to get. It's a lot at once, so that's why I like to make videos about this stuff, because you could just make yourself nuts going through all these different forums and different websites. So hopefully this will make things a little bit easier when you're trying to get set up for your new tarantula. The first thing to consider is what kind of tarantula you have. What is the species, or what is even the type, to break it down even more? Do you have an arboreal species, one that climbs, or do you have a terrestrial or burrowing species, one that stays on the ground or likes to burrow? This is going to affect a lot of what kind of tarantula enclosure you use, because arboreals, the tree dwellers, they need a vertical tank. So they're going to need an enclosure that is higher than it is wide because they can climb. And it's always good to choose the type of enclosure that mimics the environment and the activity that this tarantula is going to be doing in the wild, or that they would be doing if they were in the wild. Land dwelling or ground dwelling, like Spidey over here, this is a tarantula that does not climb too much, and even though she might try to climb sometimes, her body's not really made for that, and so it is a big risk if she is in a tank that is really high. So for tarantulas like her that either burrow or stay on the ground, it is much more suitable for them to have a landscape style tank, so one that doesn't get very high, or if you do have a high one, you want to fill it with substrate very much so that they can't really climb too much. If you have a burrowing species, you want to make sure there's even more substrate because they are going to want to dig many tunnels. The next thing you want to do when choosing a tarantula terrarium is you want to think about the age and the size of your spider. Regardless of what type of tarantula you have, if they are a burrowing tarantula, a land dwelling, or a tree dwelling tarantula, a sling of any type or species should never be kept in an enclosure that is more suitable for an adult or juvenile. Slings can usually be kept in things as small as deli cups or like drum vials. And with these little containers, you can choose ones that are more vertical or horizontal, depending on what kind of tarantula you have. And I'm actually going to be linking some different products below just to show you exactly what I'm talking about, and it might even make it easier for you if you want to buy them, just so that you can actually see exactly what I'm talking about. So I will put a little description and a link below so that you can know exactly, like visual wise, what I'm talking about. Now, if you have a tarantula that is between a sling and an adult, that is called a juvenile, and these can get a little bit of an upgrade in size. They can be kept in Tupperware containers that have holes in them. So they don't have to necessarily be in these tiny little deli cups, but maybe they're not ready for a full tank yet. And if you have a young tarantula, you want to start preparing, depending on the species that you have. You're going to want to do some research about how big these tarantulas actually get, because eventually they're going to need their adult enclosure. And you might have a smaller tarantula, maybe it doesn't get too big when it's an adult, or you might have a pretty large one that's going to need a considerable amount of space. So you want to start being prepared if your tarantula is growing. And if you do have a full-grown tarantula that's an adult, definitely go into tarantula Facebook groups as well as forums on the internet like Arachnoboards or tarantulaforum.com to see what other owners of this species that you have are using for their full-grown enclosures. Like I said, you need to use the appropriate enclosure, whether your tarantula is an arboreal, a terrestrial, or ground-dwelling tarantula, or a burrowing tarantula. But it's definitely helpful to see what others are using and to kind of see what might be best. Some adult tarantulas do not need as much space. Spidey, for example, she's a rose hair terrestrial tarantula. She's in a 10-gallon right now, but she doesn't actually need that much space. There are a lot of other tarantula owners who keep their tarantulas, their adult rose hairs, in smaller quarters. I think she actually uses all of the space, but it's really up to you. It's not always necessary. And some adults don't even get as big as her, so they might not even need as much space. So it's really good to ask around because different species have different requirements and different environments that they thrive in. The next thing is ventilation, and this is extremely important. You definitely need to be thinking about this before you even get your first tarantula enclosure to avoid making a mistake. Whether you have a sling, a juvenile, adult, whether your enclosure is a deli cup or a big tank like Spidey's, every tarantula needs ventilation. So if you have a little deli cup, you need to be taking a tiny little needle and making holes in it. If you are using a Tupperware, you need to have holes in it. If you have a big tank, there needs to be some sort of screen or holes in it. And different tarantula species, this is where the research comes in handy, have different ventilation requirements. This is why it's really good to ask around and see what other people are doing in their enclosures. A word of caution here, if you have a sling, this is not my experience, but based on the experience of others who have admitted their mistakes, you want to make sure that the ventilation holes are not big enough for your little spider to fit through. There have been a lot of tarantula owners who learned this the hard way and they had a sling escape. So make sure that those tarantula ventilation holes are not bigger than the sling and that they cannot get out. And going back to the research part, some species require more cross ventilation than others, as well as more humidity than others. So you want to make sure that you know what your tarantula needs. A lot of our boreal enclosures feature ventilation on the sides of the tank instead of the top. The top seems to be a little more popular for the terrestrial tarantulas, so you just want to keep that in mind when you are looking for an enclosure. Ventilation is really important not only for the spider but for the health of your enclosure, because for example, if you don't have good ventilation, you might actually end up having a lot of mold problems as well as bacteria. So you want to make sure that humidity, ventilation, and all of that's really good in your tank so that you can avoid that kind of stuff. Another consideration that I feel isn't really talked about enough and might even be overlooked sometimes, but it's very important. This part of your tarantula terrarium might be one of the most important actually. You need a locking mechanism. You need something that is going to prevent this tarantula from getting out and from other things from getting in. So the security of your tank is extremely important, and this goes more than locking mechanisms. This is about what kind of materials is your tank made out of. Have chemicals come in contact with it? Is it safe? So generally plexiglass, acrylic, as well as glass are pretty common options for tarantulas, and they're pretty safe too. You just want to make sure that you wash these enclosures when you get them and make sure that there's no lingering dust, chemical sprays, or anything that they could get hurt on, as well as any sticker residue. You want to make sure that's all off so they can't get stuck on it. And another really important part of terrarium safety is not only the locking mechanism, but also the lid. This is especially important for terrestrial spiders because it's very, very popular for stores to sell these kind of tanks with mesh lids. And that's actually what she has right now. She has a mesh metal lid, and I am warning people about the safety hazards of this because it's happened to Spidey before. Where, you know, a terrestrial tarantula will climb and then get stuck on the lid. And that is why I am working on getting a plexiglass lid instead to replace this, because I absolutely hate it. So there are some things that you can do to kind of discourage this and make it safer. And I've done a video tutorial on that, which I will link to in the description and try to put something up here about it. Don't know how to do that yet, but I'll figure it out. So you can definitely check that out. That's a safety feature you can put on if you have a mesh lid, but I would say as soon as you can, try to replace it because that is definitely a safety concern. And now back to the locking mechanism. I kind of saved the most important security feature for last. You don't want to put faith in your tarantula never getting out. Tarantulas are a lot stronger than we think they are sometimes, and they're also a lot more crafty than we think they are sometimes. There's been a lot of tarantula owners who never thought their tarantula would get out, and they did. They found a way. So you want to make sure that there is some sort of clamp or locking mechanism on your lid or in your enclosure. This is especially important if you have other pets or children in the house. You do not want to have an issue with your pets, your children, and your tarantula. So it's not only for keeping your tarantula in the tank, it's also from keeping other animals or curious children out of the tank. Fortunately, a lot of terrariums actually come with this safety feature and have some sort of locking mechanism, but if yours doesn't, or if it doesn't look very reliable and perhaps faulty, you want to make sure that you come up with something better. And one final thought about safety and security for tarantula terrariums, where you put it is also really important. So putting it somewhere where a pet's not going to knock it over. Unfortunately, I see this in a lot of tarantula groups where they never think that their cat's going to get in the tank, but the cat does, or they knock it over or something like that. So if you have kids or other pets, you want to make sure that the tarantula terrarium is not in a location that it can be bothered or hurt or anything else. So you want to make sure that that's secure too. And I have another blog post that goes in a lot into different location considerations to take into account. So I'm going to link that below, and you could definitely check that out because that's very, very important. Anyway, guys, I hope that this gave you a little bit of a guideline as far as picking out a tarantula terrarium. I know it's a lot of information. It can be confusing to navigate, especially if it's your first time. So I hope that that kind of shed some light and kind of gave you some direction. And if you like more videos like this, you can definitely subscribe. You can also sign up for my Tarantula Tuesday newsletter, where I share my videos as well as other information about tarantulas and other projects I'm working on. And you can also get some personal stories about my life with Spidey and my little sling Blinky. So you can sign up for that at tarantulaheaven.com on the newsletter sign up link. And you can also get access to my full tarantula guide if you would like more information about the full scope of tarantula care. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. And if you have any other enclosure tips for newbies, I would love to hear them, and I'm sure that they would too. So leave them in the comments below. And I'll see you next time, guys. Have a great one. Bye.